pal.
Tonight's Modern Men is powered by the Hero Initiative. Are you interested in becoming a hero? Go to theheroinitiative.org to see how you can be a hero to those comic creators in need. Hey, how's it going, guys? We're back. It's Monday night. It's 10 p.m. It's time for Modern Men. I'm excited.
Modern people, Carson.
We'll get to the casting.
We're not even a minute in.
No, you never get used to this, Andy. It's a thing. I don't remember what I was gonna say right now, so I'm gonna pitch it to Andy and his beard. Andy, the beard, how's it going?
Oh, it is going, and we are here to talk about the House of Beard tonight, right? Like that's why I'm here. Yeah.
No more whiskers.
It's like no, comma, more beards. Drew, how you doing down there?
Oh, man, it's been a long day, and I don't have any culture in my life today, so I got kind of a headache, and I'm going to be a little bit tempestuous, as if you guys could expect anything less from me.
Now, when we mentioned House of M, and we're talking about WandaVision, this person, our guest tonight, came running. Andy Banks. Andy, how you doing tonight?
Hi, happy to be here. Thank you guys so much for bringing me on, and I'm really excited to dig into this topic, especially with its relevancy and how much of a surprise the show has truly become to be, breaking in Marvel and that Disney Plus scene. My goodness.
Absolutely. So, like I said, I was really looking forward to this one. Before I keep going, I got to hop into the chat here and say hi to a few folks first. We got Chad was first. Oh, my God. Chad R. is in the chat. What is going on, man? We got that deadbeat, no good Stream Elements robot. He keeps collecting money, but he doesn't do anything. Good on you, Stream Elements robot. I don't know why he has a wrench. We got the Mastodon Comics and Music. What is going on, man? The Mastodon, one of my favorites in the whole community. Definitely check out his channel. He's starting to do some more music reviews as well. So definitely go check those out over there. We got Captain Comics, ahoy, mates and mermaids. One of the best intros of all chats. Captain Comics, absolutely salute. And my first subscriber ever, Fish Tropic. How's it going, man? Definitely another one of my favorites in the community. I still have bumper stickers and stuff everywhere from good old Catfish Tropic, I guess. And then, of course, Binary ComicManAndy. Okay, there you go.
Has anybody ever tried actually speaking the language of the bot?
No.
Carson hates
What did you say to him? For them? Or she?
It's code.
I guess I just talked to it in middle fingers. But anyway, I am so excited. First off, a good read this week. Sorry, Drew, I had to say it.
Hey, it's just a good week this week. It was a great read last week. Just because Carson didn't like it doesn't mean you shouldn't go out and check it out. Headlopper Volume 1. It's a must-read, folks. Go out and get it.
A read I was thrilled to talk about for the first time in what feels like forever, House of M. So I guess just to give a little bit of, usually we'll go around the table and talk about what our history is with this story and why it's basically important to us. So around the time I started collecting again, there were a few runs I was picking up. And one of those was Ultimate X-Men. I was kind of messing with Ultimate X-Men a little bit. Mark Millar and the Kuberts were doing the art on that, but then they did this dramatic team switch in like Ultimate X-Men and a couple Marvel books. And around Ultimate X-Men issue 34, I believe it was, Brian Bendis and David Finch joined this book, and immediately that first cover of like Wolverine and Spider-Man both together just popped to me. I had to get that when it hit the stands, and it was the first time I had seen David Finch's art, and I thought it was very good at the time, of course. And I ended up getting that whole run up until about issue 50 once Bendis and Finch left on there. But the reason I'm mentioning all of this is they moved that creative team to the Avengers, so they basically like looked at the success rate Brian Bendis had with the Ultimate stuff and Ultimate Spider-Man and then Ultimate X-Men, and was just like, if this guy we can create a universe around this guy and he can make it bigger than our actual books, why don't we put this guy on our actual 616 books? So they brought him and Finch into Avengers Disassembled. Issue 500 is just happened to be that fun renumbering Marvel loves to go back to now. It worked with Fantastic Four, the whole Mark Waid, Mike Wieringo, Unthinkable, which we've already reviewed on this channel. Amazing read. Go check it out if you haven't. But they brought us Avengers Disassembled, which basically the Scarlet Witch just wreaks havoc in this. She kills off most of the team.
Carson, I hate to interrupt.
Go ahead.
But it looks like somebody wrote their name on that.
Oh, yeah. I do have a signature from David Finch right there, the world's tiniest signature. Cool. Thank you, David Finch. But yeah, I do have a signed copy here.
Would you call that signature bird-like?
Hey-oh.
It's a little Finchy.
With David Finch, got a chance to have him sign this book. And by the way, before we keep going, Chris Barrett, what's going on, man? I was getting worried Chris Barrett was not in the chat. Now he is in the chat. But basically, the main reasoning for this run was so they could introduce the next run of New Avengers, which I have number 1 on the wall up there. So I brought in number 2 to show off. But at this point, yeah, they basically restructured the Avengers to make it like their Justice League at the time. And the reason I say that is back in the day, they didn't have the A-list of the A-list on Marvel's Avengers at the time. They had Iron Man and Cap, and those were your main Avengers. Of course, you had like Hawkeye, Scarlet Witch, so on and so forth. But they wanted to bring in guys like Luke Cage, Spider-Man, Wolverine, Spider-Woman even got in here. So really, Bendis wanted to recreate this team based on A-listers and build around that with characters like the Sentry, which had only a couple of appearances prior to this. So basically, they restructured Avengers. Meanwhile, my other favorite book when I was collecting was New X-Men. This is like the only book I kind of kept track of when I wasn't collecting. So I love this book when it came out. Obviously, there's issue New X-Men, issue 116. Grant Morrison, Frank Quietly. Eventually, they blew up Genosha in this first arc. So that's obviously important going into House of M. And, of course, they eventually handed the reins off to Joss Whedon and John Cassaday to create the Astonishing X-Men to kind of make the X-Men superheroes again. So both of these stories combine kind of into the start of House of M. So House of M, I could not wait to get my hands on this book just because the main reads I read when I was collecting around 2005 converged into this. In my opinion, this is how you set up a big event, which Marvel would continue this formula verbatim years on end. So, Andy, I don't know if you've had a chance to really visit House of M too many times. What are your first experiences with this story?
Well, this is actually my second read through. Thankfully, what was it? We were going through Messiah Complex here on Modern Men. And Drew actually suggested, hey, you like the Messiah Complex. You're going to love House of M. You really need to dig into that. So I did it at one point, but it had been long enough that I had kind of forgotten that I had read it. And I'd forgotten some of the tidbits and some of the lead-in stuff that I kind of nitpicked here and there at. So I dove into this, and I was like, oh, yeah, I remember this. And I really got right into it. So for only my second read, I loved it even more than I did the first time around. And I still can't shake that feeling of hopelessness. This book leaves me with a feeling of hopelessness because it doesn't quite end the way I hoped it would. And I really want to see where the rest of this goes after this.
Nice. What about you, Drew? Did you get the chance to buy this when it came out, or did you read it later down the line?
This came out. I feel like this was right before I started really collecting again, and I went back and read it after I read the Disassembled stuff. I was basically told, hey, after Disassembled, check out what's going on with the X-Men because Wanda, the Pretender, Wanda Maximoff, is really losing her shit, which is pretty cool. I love the fact that this has lasting implications on the Marvel Universe for when did this come out?
2005.
2005. So we're looking at 15 plus years of this story still having an impact. This is the reason why in Hickman's X-Men, the children all speak of Wanda as if she's Voldemort, the one who should not be named, the Pretender, who said no more mutants. And and she's become basically the biggest villain in the MCU as far as I don't know if they're gonna take her and make her a villain in the cinematic universe, but in the Marvel universe, she is definitely one of the biggest villains, and it all stems from her not being able to control her powers and not being able to deal with her own personal trauma. And you kind of feel bad for her and for Pietro as well, even though Pietro's just a dick. But these characters have been put through the ringer. They have never had a solid family upbringing. They have never had the kind of support that they need from their peers. And man, did Pietro kind of push? Yeah, I think that line's coming. Pietro really pushed Wanda over the edge here and really screwed up everything in the entire universe. So I really love the way that this book has it didn't seem as important at first. You know, you're like, oh, they're going to pocket dimension, they're going to undo everything. But this has really had long-lasting implications on the entire universe.
Absolutely. Before I pitch it to Annie, I do want to go back to the chat. A couple more people I want to say hi to. We got, once again, Comics Misexplained. What is going on, man? Nice to see you in the chat. And we got Comic Mag Musings hanging out in the chat as well. And then Chris Bear, of course, Wanda heel turn. Yeah, that's kind of debatable. We'll get into that. But Annie, like I said, when I mentioned we're going to read this, you could not wait to get on the show and talk about it. So what is House of M mean to you?
I'm so excited that you reached out. So I got into House of M when when I was really trying to break into the comic scene and really embracing my love for such a niche community and the books that bring everyone together. And I think that I started reaching out to like my very few and in between comic friends, and I was like, what do you guys think I should read? I want to get into this. I really want to sink into this universe head first. What do I read? What do I get into? And they're like, you want to read House of M? And I was like, well, okay, and I got into it, and I was like, this is, you get it from Wanda's trauma, and, from a feminine standpoint, I see why, she's so torn up about not only the twins, but everything else that's out of her control. I think that's a very different perspective to be taken from compared to how we've seen infertility and comic women before, Joss Whedon. But I think, that her losing her mind over herself, losing that control of her life and who she is really just a brilliant retcon for this series. And it really just brings in a lot of interesting characters, a lot of key players that come out of the shadows and come out of the woodwork. Like, I never thought I would see Wolverine and Spider-Man team up, but I really do like these pairings, and I think it's a very smart book. I think it's very intelligent. I think it knows exactly what it's doing at every turn, and I think it sets up this universe both on paper and through the lens of a camera, but it be television, film, miniseries, what have you. It really can weasel its way into these different pockets of the company media. It's really, really cool to see that happen in real time. I like how it is being toyed with. I like how there's a lot of excitement buzzing around WandaVision with House of M without it explicitly being given away that it is influenced by House of M, despite Bettany and Olsen saying that, yeah, this is by House of, or this is by the Visions, and this is what we took it from. I think it's really neat how these implications are being made and how tasteful House of M is being pulled from the pages. And even reading it, Andy, you're right. It leaves you with a very hollow feeling. You really want to see things work out in one way, and they just don't. And you kind of close the book, and you feel like you yourself are powerless. You don't have the control. You kind of feel like Wanda, where you're out of control. You want things to happen, and then they don't. It's a really, very complex book, but it's a really good read to go back into and revisit. Every couple of years I reread it, and it's really nice to get back into it.
So, Carson, you mentioned how Bendis took New Avengers and kind of made it the A-list Avengers again. Which is really something to think about when you think of Pietro and Wanda, because are they A-list Avengers? I would venture to say that they are. Which you get like 12 issues before they join the team. So they're from that first volume of Avengers. They're like the first face turn heels that join the team, and for them to feel so much on the outside of both the Avengers and the X-Men in this story is very telling to kind of see how everybody in the world kind of stacks up against them. And the beginning of the book, I'm sure we're going to get into more of a synopsis here shortly, but in the beginning of the book, it's just like, they're at a point where even their father Magneto says to Pietro when they want to kill Wanda, what would you have me do? Like, obviously I don't want to kill my own kid, but it's really the best idea we've got.
Ouch.
Yeah, and I was going to say, we can go ahead and get into the story and first impressions and that stuff. So the book does open up with like the shocking scene of Wanda giving birth to, the twins. We've heard many things about at this point as readers and now viewers of WandaVision. And Vision's there, Doctor Strange is there, but the only person who's kind of like, hey, Wanda, none of this is real. Professor Xavier's there because they're actually in Genosha, which has been blown up by Sentinels at this point. It's basically just Wanda, Magneto, and Charles Xavier on Genosha because of the events going on in Excalibur at the time, which was a short-run book. I think Chris Claremont wrote that one. But anyway, basically, Charles Xavier is kind of just seeing this like small, minute thing that Scarlet Witch could do compared to what she's going to do later, at least. And they're both really concerned about what's going to happen next. Like, obviously, Xavier knows something bad's really going to happen, and Wanda is just hysterical over the fact that she can barely tell reality from fantasy at this point. She's in grief because she did what she did during Avengers Disassembled, especially to Vision. So she is just kind of completely out of control. And then we haven't even talked about Olivier Coipel's art. And you mentioned it, Andy. His art is very cinematic throughout this whole thing, and he really does some of his best work ever here. So, Andy, I want to hear some of your first impressions here, bud.
Well, my first impressions here going through this book is I have to ask myself if he knows how to draw a superhero neck, because most of the superheroes here in this book have no neck. It's head to shoulder, and they look like they belong on a beach running through the sands with a flotation device ready to save somebody or lifting some weight somewhere. That's kind of just a nitpick pet peeve, but I mean, like, come on. He does a very excellent job, or she, I can't quite remember, does a very excellent job with Xavier and Spider-Man and some of the other characters, but then when you look at Cyclops and you look at Falcon or a lot of the other guys that you see crop up in here, there's literally no neck. It's just tank, and then head. And I'm like, I just, for some reason, it just continues to Magneto on like page 4, page 5, like comically bad.
It's injecting the juice right directly into his traps.
Well, that is
just doing shrugs all day. Yeah.
Like, I can handle Wolverine being like this big roid monster sometimes. That, like, Eric Lensher is an old man who controls metal. Like, I don't think he should look like he's been bodybuilding. Yeah. So I do agree with you there, Andy.
That's a nitpicky kind of thing at the surface, but then just below that, at that panel, actually, you see Genosha destroyed in excellent artwork and detail with the sun setting back there. You get these amazing panels, you get these amazing scenes, the character walk-ups. Some of the whole stuff is laid out really well, but there's some nitpicky stuff here and there. Overall, the art's really good.
What about you, Drew?
I think the art really services the story. Here's the thing: is I just read through this again this morning, and I can't really tell you like any really big splash pages or any panels that really spoke to me via the art. I think it's good, but not very memorable.
What about you, Andy? What did you think of the art?
I gotta agree with these guys. Like Andy was saying, I think there was really hit or miss with this artwork. You have and as Drew just pointed out, there's these really just very vibrant and very well done panels that are very impactful. but there's really not a specific page that jumps out at you and just grabs you. And I think with every storytelling, your visuals and your dialogue or your writing or your direction or what have you really need to reflect one another. And I feel like there's more strength in this writing than there is the artwork. What you were saying about Magneto and Xavier, they have a signature look to them, and they're both ailing. They're both, senile old men. I think that is reflected, or with Wolverine being just like this 5'2" little steroid monster, like that you could tell from that. But it's not something that carries out throughout the book, but is made up with dialogue and very impactful writing.
And I think that the colors really work to convey mood more so than the line work does to really impress me on any other level.
Yeah, I get that. I do just at least appreciate Coipel's art for its consistency. Sorry, I just think the book looks solid throughout. But I think you guys had a pretty good point. Like, I'm trying to think like that one big splash panel. Like the only one I can kind of think of is Wolverine just jumping out of that helicarrier later, or then you see that whole cityscape of how New York has changed around the events of House of M and that stuff. But beyond that, that's probably the most memorable panel for me by far. But as we go on with the story here, and it's an 8-issue run, but they all read really, really quick in my opinion. But they really hit on the fact here that Xavier's going back to New York. He's been in Genosha for a while now, and he's pretty much summoning all active and retired Avengers as well as the astonishing X-Men to really kind of figure out what they can do with Wanda Maximoff at this point. And even Doctor Strange is consulted in, of course, too. I don't think he's quite a new Avenger at this point in time, but he will be, sooner than later, of course. But this is where they really spark the debate that takes up most of the issue on what do they do with Wanda Maximoff. So they all kind of just want to go talk to her. Of course, that's, what heroes will do. They want to help their friend. At the end of the day, they realize that, this is the same Wanda Maximoff that they fought side by side with for all those years. So they go to Genosha, and they're walking around, no one's there, they can't get beat on anybody, and Spider-Man, he kind of takes the lead because he thinks his spider sense is going to kick in when there's danger, and he just sees a big white flash of light, and he wakes up in his bed next to his wife Gwen Stacy, and they get the to be continued. So what'd you think of this cliffhanger, Andy?
I had to stop and go back a couple of pages and reread it a few times because, I'm like, wait, did that just happen? Wait, let me reread that again. I liked it. That definitely perked my interest and got me deeper into the read. That okay, this is good. There's more at play here than what I'm not giving the book enough credit going into it, so I need to stop and pay more attention.
What about you, Drew?
Man, everybody gets what they want, and you think that he'd just want to hang out with his hot redhead, but no, he wants the dead blonde. That to me is the biggest tell in this story, is that in the perfect existence, he's with Gwen, he's not with Mary Jane. So that to me, I think that's the kind of the leap that lets you know that something is really off here. If he would have woke up in bed next to Mary Jane, it would have been like, okay, well, what the hell's going on here? But the fact that he wakes up next to Gwen, who has been dead forever, that right there is the first sign that something is amiss.
Annie, are you a big Gwen Stacy fan?
I am a big Gwen Stacy fan. I really like Gwen. She's my girl if I had to choose a Spider-Woman. But I think it was interesting how they decided to bring Gwen back in this instance compared to this ongoing relationship with MJ. And it kind of toys, again, with the idea of what is reality and what isn't reality. I think it's a really nice transition into the multiverse that we're about to enter as well. I think that with bringing back Peter's former love interest and kind of making up his own delusion in a way, his own, or mental reality that he enters. I think that's really nice to expand on where this book might go as a cliffhanger and how it just doesn't focus on Wanda and her own delusions, but these other characters fighting the demons as they go while trying to, face this larger challenge at hand.
Absolutely. So once we get in issue 2, you kind of see at least the mutants get their wishes fulfilled, basically, it seems like, in this reality they're in. And even to its extent, of course, Spider-Man. He has his, not only does he have Aunt May aside, he's going to have Uncle Ben there to, help raise that kid that him and Gwen Stacy has. It's a perfect reality for Spider-Man and several of the other mutants. You have Emma Frost and Cyclops are married. You have Miss Marvel is like the big Homo sapiens superhero now. But, of course, mutants are the dominant species in this world. You find out pretty quick. And then you get Gambit for two pages for some reason. He's still in a bag of cash and immediately gets destroyed by Miss Marvel. That was a pretty fun panel. You have Kitty Pryde as a teacher, which is pretty perfect for her character. Colossus, he's farming. You don't see him again, really. They ask about him once. That's it. And then probably the biggest shocker is Captain America. Turns out he didn't get frozen in World War II. He just lived his life. So that was kind of a nice little touch. I thought that was like the most intelligent part of the story. Obviously, we were talking about, just fun touches earlier. Just what if Captain America survived World War II and went on to live his life? And you kind of get a little bit. I think he gets a one-shot issue in his own series if you wanted to read more about that. But before I start asking you guys questions, I did want to say hi to a few people in the chat. Earlier, we had Bill Smallwood. What's going on, man? Thanks for hopping in and saying hi in the chat. We still got Comics Explained, Chris Barrett hanging out. And, of course, Downright Nerdy Podcast. What is going on, man? One of the best pods out there. Definitely. I can't wait for those guys to come back. But I don't know about you, Andy, but I love me some Downright Nerdy.
Absolutely.
Andy,
looking forward to it.
Did you have a favorite, character change here going into issue 2? Is there a particular, storyline that spurred your interest right off the bat?
I can't say favorite, really. The one that I enjoyed the most, not necessarily my favorite. I'm not a Spider-Man fan. I'll say that. I've said it before. I'll say it again. I'm more of a fan of the tertiary characters in the Spider-Man universe than Spider-Man himself. But what I really enjoyed was the fact that by making him a dad, they used making him a dad to normalize him more than they've already normalized him throughout all of these years reading and writing him and whatnot. So making him a dad and having him being the tired, groggy, worn out guy getting up, doing the whatever, I think it was like a feeding or a diaper change at that time, to the point where you go to the couple of pages in where they're talking about getting together with the family. He's got that slouched, I'm tired, just that look of being a dad and tired. I really kind of dug that and connected with that because I know what that feels like.
What about you, Drew?
Anybody who knows my proclivities for comic book knows that I love Captain Marvel. When I say Captain Marvel, I mean Marvel of the Kree Empire. I also am a big fan of Ms. Marvel, and when I say Ms. Marvel, I mean Carol freaking Danvers. I love her in this. I love the fact that she's her wish is to be the most popular superhero ever. Guess what, Carol? Doesn't work out for you. But beyond that, I just really think that's funny that Bendis was like, Carol Danvers, she's going to be, she's super powerful. Let's go ahead and make her a popular character, which Marvel has tried to do via the publication history, via her own movies, but the Captain Marvel character doesn't seem to catch on as much as people want it to, and I think that that's kind of poetic here. I really do enjoy her, especially in this era of Marvel, but I think that her having her wish of being a big badass superhero that everybody loves is something that's kind of telling for her character history.
What about you, Annie? What character were you interested in exploring more once you got to this point?
I really liked Kitty Pryde's little side arc. Really, I've always really dug her personality, her very upbeat, her bubbliness, her very cheeriness. I think she's just a really charismatic young woman to follow in these stories. And watching her kind of teach the history of mutants and kind of take on a new Professor X-ish type of role, I think that was a really nice nod to that character arc, that character and that character arc for her. In this book, I just think it was really suiting for her, and you could kind of see the energy drain from her. That's a really interesting flip for a usually very chipper and energetic character. I just enjoy her, and I think it's really cool to see her in a new light.
No, absolutely agree. And I like that scene, too, where she's teaching. The kids are throwing papers at each other, but you kind of know she's also teaching about mutation in a heroic way. She's talking about like who was the first mutant, and they're talking about Namor and class and stuff. And
yeah, it's really neat
a little
to see
interesting
that history come back. Yeah.
Yeah. But before I go further, we got Ricky Markstadt in the chat, founder of the Comic Discord server. What is going on, Ricky?
What's up, Ricky?
But the big twist here is Wolverine. So Wolverine, he wakes up, and you think he wakes up next to Jean Grey because you're like, oh, so Gwen Stacy can come back. That means Jean Grey can come back, right? Oh, it was just Mystique being Mystique, basically. But what they can't figure out is Wolverine has had his memory messed up so many times, he is somehow now immune to the Wanda hex that's going on. So he remembers everything and kind of everything. He's just flooded with confusion and memories. But at the end of the day, he does remember what happened before House of M started, basically. So he just does what Wolverine does. He jumps off the helicarrier, my favorite scene probably in the whole thing. And he lands in Times Square, and you see how much Times Square has changed. So he knows the only person who can kind of help out at this point is Charles Xavier. So he goes to, Gray Malkin Lane looking for Charles Xavier, just some dude shacked up in that house. It's not the X-Men, of course. He's running all over the place. He can't figure out what to do. But unfortunately for him, he also has S.H.I.E.L.D. on his tail because he is a member of S.H.I.E.L.D. And the S.H.I.E.L.D. team in this is Rogue, Toad, Nightcrawler, Spider-Woman, and Mystique. I would definitely read this book. What about you, Drew?
Yeah, I do enjoy all these characters together. I think that they form a kind of a unique team. I think that Toad finally gets a chance to shine here. Where Toad is constantly shit on by the writers of the X universe. Even when it comes down to Toad becomes a good guy and he sides with the X-Men after all of this nonsense, and then he's in the Wolverine and the X-Men book as the janitor of the school, and everybody's like, Mr. Toad, and he's like, oh, stop messing up the school, kids. He's like the Filch from the Harry Potter character. Mm-hmm. He's just curmudgeonly old man who's like, I gotta mop up all your turds. and I like to see him kind of shine here. And I love that Rogue is a total powerhouse on this team as well. I think a really good characterizations of these mutants as they work together with Sentinels on their side to hunt down Wolverine because they know something's wrong with him, something's all out of whack.
Yeah, so basically in the middle of this whole conflict, Cloak shows up, which a character I haven't read too much of, I'll be perfectly honest, but I'm just familiar enough with the nose power set. He shows up and basically takes Wolverine out of the scene and takes him to this team up that's been going on behind the scenes. But there's a lot of members of this, but the main member that kind of stands out is Hawkeye, because at this point Hawkeye is supposed to be dead. And you can kind of just tell, the way they write Hawkeye, he seems a lot more aggressively written at this point. I don't know if it's because of the character in the 2000s, if it's because he knows he's been brought back from the dead. Annie, I know you're a big Hawkeye fan. What did you think about this version of Hawkeye?
You know what? I gotta agree with you there. This is not kind of the Hawkeye that we really know. And he's not this really chilled out, straight level hero who's making his coffee and talking to his dog. And, it's a new look for him. And I don't know if I liked it or not. I don't know if I liked how sharply he came across. I can understand the frustration that he was written with. He's thrown in this whole mess. He's got to piece himself together. He's come back. But this is not the Clint Barton that I really just gotten behind and wanted to cheer on. This is a different really look at him. And it kind of reminded me of how they wanted to introduce Ronan in Endgame, where they wanted to embrace this other side of Hawkeye. But even though this isn't Ronan, it's a very similar personality as Renner put across in that last Avengers movie. And again, it kind of left an odd taste in my mouth. I wanted to like it because I'm like, that's Hawkeye. And then I kept reading and I was like, I don't know.
The last time I saw him, he was getting exploded.
Yeah.
See, I'm polar opposite there, where I've never really been a Hawkeye fan, but I think the way he's written here, I dug it more so. Just I think what they did in this book is what Renner brings to the character on the screen, right? This edgy attitude kind of where I kind of looked and enjoyed for that more in this book than I did in other Hawkeye reads. Anything that I've read.
Yeah, it's so much different than what I've read from, say, the Matt Fraction run, which I think is, one of my top favorite runs, obviously, ever for Hawkeye. But yeah, it's just so different. He was more aggressive. He reminded me more of Wolverine than Wolverine in this story, as funny as that sounds. But before I keep going, let's hop back in chat. We do have a few people hopping in here. We still got Ricky Markstadt. We got Z Collects. What's going on, man? How you doing?
What's up,
we got
Z?
Rebel Comics. Long time no see, man. How you doing, Rebel? And we still have, for the first time, I should say, Stevie B. What's going on, Stevie B Comics? How you doing, man? But as you keep going, you find out Luke Cage is kind of like the de facto leader of this underground crew, and Wolverine has to explain to him and this band of rebels basically what's happening, and they kind of shouldn't believe him, but they do, because Andy, I don't know if you remember this character or not, we got Layla Miller introduced into the story for the first time.
Walking Deus Ex Machina.
Yes, absolutely. Andy, did you miss Layla Miller? What did you think about seeing her first appearance here?
I did. I enjoyed it. Now, refresh my memory. This is the character we're talking about from Messiah Complex, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. She knows stuff.
She's just drawn just slightly different enough for me to make me go back and forth a couple of times to triple check, and then I forgot in the last 3 days. But yeah, it was good to see her back, because then it helped tie this in a little more like Drew was telling me, and this just re-solidifies what Drew had to say about Andy. Get in and read this book after reading Messiah Complex.
Yeah, you want to figure out what's going on with Layla. She's just a girl who knows things. And it's kind of, while she's an interesting character, and you get to see a lot more of her character in Messiah Complex and the X Factor run leading up to Messiah Complex, if you take Layla Miller out of this book, you can really replace her with anybody. It's just Bendis being like, here's this placeholder character who's the key to everything, but at the same time means nothing, has no history, has no trajectory going forward. And to be honest, that kind of trope is something that I don't tend to care for in stories. Like, we're going to meet this character, and this character is the key to everything, but you're never going to see him again. And, but I think that with the art and the way that she's depicted, and I kind of like Layla Miller as a character, man. I feel like there's something there that you can utilize in a couple of different ways, and they do a nice job with her moving forward. But yeah, she's a total throwaway, kind of shoehorned in here into this story at first. So overall, I have mixed emotions about Layla Miller.
Now, I kind of agree with you, Drew. I feel like, Bendis threw this character, and just because he needed some way, somehow, for the character we put in front of the other mutants and heroes, and boom, they remember who they are. I get it. But I think I just really like Layla Miller because Peter David looked at this like, hey, you guys are done with that character, right? I think I'll take her and put her in X Factor and have some fun with that character.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely get that. So, yeah, as we keep going here, you see the Sentinels attack, which, they're not hunting mutants anymore, obviously. They're hunting humans. And now they're deciding what their next move is going to be. So they kind of figure out what Layla's power is. And since Charles Xavier's off the map, they decide, we got Emma Frost and Scott Summers. That's who we need to go look for, because they're the next in line for the X-Men. So luckily for them, Emma Frost is the first one who walks through the door, and Layla Miller's powers fire up, and you kind of see, it's kind of like watching that random last season of Lost again, where they all get their memories flooded back, basically. So you kind of get to see that for the characters of Emma and then Scott later down the line, basically. So yeah, what did you guys think of this whole sequence of them just going to that apartment and then being like, why are you in my apartment? Then all of a sudden, like, oh, hold on, honey. Let's fix your brain. Andy, I'll start with you.
It was awkward. It was kind of this awkward, like, being transposed into a sitcom of Cyclops and what's her face? Blanking again. But then they get them pulled back out eventually, one by one as they go. The apartment scene, though, was almost feel like they tried to add some comedic breaks in here, and they could have chopped it in half.
It's kind of Bendis' style. He's gonna throw a little bit of situational humor in with his stories, especially when he's got a large cast of characters and wants to have them meld together. There's going to be some tropey jokes where he just kind of forces them into situations where hilarity will ensue. I think that what happens in this apartment scene, though, is it is a little bit more than it needs to be, Andy. I agree with you there. But this is really the crux of it. You're really opening everybody's minds, and everybody needs to be on the same page. And so put them in a place where they're all going to get the truth revealed to them. So I dig that.
I just wish the pacing wasn't as awkward. You know what I mean? Like, I totally get
very awkwardly paced.
It's so important to be inserted in this specific arc of the book. It just felt so out of place and very awkward to read, because I kind of was like, am I missing something here? And I kind of reread and read back again up to that specific apartment scene. I was like, no, this is right, and I had to kind of reassure myself that this was continuum along that storyline. But at the same time, I think it kind of uses, like you were saying, Bendis uses that humor where he really tries to defuse his own situations that he creates by countering it himself, and he knows how to counter it, and he knows how he wants to do that. And I think kind of throwing in that very lopsided loop where we got Emma Frost and Cyclops, you're like, okay, this is different. And it's very memorable because it is different. Is it the most articulate scene? No, but we're talking about it. It sticks out. And I think that if it sticks out, it's doing some sort of job.
Absolutely. Before I give my 2 cents, I want to say hi to some people in the chat, because we got a lot of people flooding in here. We got Rebel Comics saying no more mutants, of course. Yeah, we're definitely going to get to that. We got Connecticut Comics. What is going on? Nice to see you in the chat. We got Not Near Mint Rob Worst. What is going on, man? He's saying, wonder what happens when Pietro runs the Westchester house and wonders where that mansion is.
More like
Maybe
Rob
we'll find
Best.
out Friday. Yeah, Rob Best. Absolutely. You still got Chris Barrett hanging out. We got Come On Mama. What is going on? Come On Mama. I love that name. That's awesome. And we got Nightwing 69. He says, hello, men and one lady. So, yeah, these scenes, you kind of hit the nail on the head, Annie. I think, they're kind of inconsistent. It's like they wanted more time to do this than later. You can kind of just see panel superhero. Oh, their eyes are green, so on and so forth. But the one that really sticks out and deservedly gets the big panel time, if you will, is Peter Parker, because Wolverine's like, I want to go get Parker. So they go get Peter Parker, and they see he has a family and a kid and all this, and they decide to bring him back. And it's just kind of funny to see how Peter Parker reacts, because earlier in that issue 1, you literally just see him. He's kind of nonchalant, as Spider-Man will be. He's cracking jokes and that stuff. And then you see this crazy character turn because of everything that's happened to him mentally, where he is just filled with anger and rage because of, number one, he's kind of been snapped out of this loop. And then he has both sets of memories, and he remembers, Gwen, who he's married to in this story. He remembers her neck getting snapped. And he actually says, I think earlier he was talking about, we don't need to go kill Wanda. That's pretty harsh. And now he's like, I'm going to beat them with my bare hands.
Yeah.
Which I've read a decent amount of Spider-Man comics, I think. I can't remember one other time I've seen Spider-Man this angry.
Can I ask a serious question?
Yeah.
Was this issue a different artist?
No, it was Koi Po the whole time, I believe.
Okay, silly question leading into a serious question. Why does Spider-Man look like 3 different people between 3 or 4 pages here? You get the giant 2-page splash, and even on that giant 2-page splash, Peter Parker looks like 2. And I'm not talking subtle differences with glasses and looking in the mirror or a hat or clothing changes. He literally looks like different shades and different complexions, different ethnicities, and what the hell? This is one of those nitpicky things when I'm reading through this book, I'm like, we're still talking about Peter Parker, right? Because this guy looks completely different. And I was a little frustrated with that, I'm not going to lie.
I do want to shout out my friend Ricky Markstadt once again. I mentioned you earlier, bud, but I think your stuff was buffering. We love you. We love the Discord, man. Ricky Markstadt, one of the best. Anyway, Drew, what did you think about Peter Parker here?
I think that Peter's breakdown is probably one of my favorite things in this book. And that's because he knows that it's not real, but in finding out that his life isn't real, not only does he lose his child, but he loses Gwen all over again. And for, him to have had as many hotties in his life as he's had, even that spicy redhead Mary Jane, losing Gwen again is just like, dude, you never forget that first girl that you let die, right?
I don't know. I've never
Are
been
you
there.
speaking from experience, Drew?
Sure. Why not?
Okay.
Look, there have been many that I was unable to save, right? But you never forget the first.
Very vigilant of you.
Yeah, Annie, what did you think? As that big Gwen Stacy fan, what did you think about this whole scene?
I don't know. Like Drew just said, it's really difficult to watch a character that you really like and really resonate with in some ways die again, Because I've never been the world's biggest Peter Parker fan, but as Andy mentioned earlier, I think what makes the Spider-Verse so interesting is the characters that inhabit it and not the titular character himself. And I think with Gwen being such an important figure to Peter, not having to watch her die but once and then again and realize that his reality is, he knows he's not in reality, but, knowing that you're not in reality and still having that breakdown, that very intense moment, and then just watching it reflect on what could have been for these characters that you enjoy and you really like to follow that story out. I think it was a very pivotal moment for this book in particular.
I think Bendis really handles Peter a lot better than he does a lot of other characters too. And a lot of that comes from all of his experience writing Ultimate Spider-Man for all those years. Mm-hmm. I just feel like he's got a lot of experience with Peter, and he sees Peter as the entry-level character for the universe, and I think a lot of people do. Without tugging at Peter's heartstrings, it kind of would have felt maybe a little bit empty in the story. They just tried to do it with the other characters. I think you got to look at that street level, everyman Peter Parker and tear his heart out to get to the readers.
No, I think it's probably the most important scene, in my opinion, to the whole story. You just see the effects that it had on Peter, and you can only imagine the effects you're not seeing on panel with the other heroes, but especially everything Peter Parker's been through as Spider-Man, and just to have like every time he gets this like little kernel of hope in his life, it seems like it's just ripped away from him every time. And dang,
oh, the chat is popping me, Carson. I'm going to put this one right up. Chris Barrett says, Gwen dying is like watching Terry Funk get knocked out by the thrown chair by an ECW fan. Messed up at first, but funny the more you see it.
Wow.
I mean, you're a fucked up asshole, Chris Barrett, but I couldn't agree with you more.
All right, moving on in the story. Basically, the SHIELD crew shows up again after they keep bringing people back. And in the conflict, Rogue comes into contact with Layla Miller and magically gives her entire SHIELD team the memories back. So they get they have a pretty good crew at this point. So they're actually able to have the SHIELD crew get them on the helicarrier, use them as powers to control the pilot of the helicarrier, and they're going right for Genosha at this point. And meanwhile, you see all the other dignitaries in the world of the House of M. Obviously, the one that I would love to read more of is Fantastic Four Dr. Doom. He has, he doesn't have to wear the mask anymore because he has this face that he's always wanted. He doesn't have that tiny scar that makes him want to cover it up. And you just see the slightest little number 4 on his belt buckle, indicating he has 3 other friends with him. But they're in the shadows in the panel here, so you don't really know what's going on there. But you know just enough to realize that he's kind of living his fantasy too. Latveria is obviously a big enough nation to be welcome to this big summit. And then you see Storm's involvement too and that stuff. But it's just kind of like they're on a shoestring plan here, basically. Their plan is to take out Magneto, go see if Charles Xavier is still alive, and hope it all turns out well. Is that, am I wrong, Andy? Is that what you got out of this whole thing?
Pretty much, yeah.
What'd you think of this plot, Drew?
You know what? I think that it's kind of funny that it's called House of M, right? And Magnus is the leader of the House of Magnus, and he's basically the leader of the free world at this point. He runs Shield, he runs, his kingdom, and everybody kind of is under the umbrella of Magneto. So initially they're all like, this is Magneto's doing, right? Like that's Magneto's not the bad guy in this story at all, but they all see him as the one thing they can all focus their energy upon.
Yeah.
And I think it's a little short-sighted, but then again, like what other choice they got? They've all just realized that reality isn't what they want it to be. Magneto's in charge. He must be the linchpin of this whole thing. Let's find Xavier, because if somebody can get into these people's heads, it's Xavier. Oh wait, that dude's dead. So
is he though?
Is he? Or is he?
Or is he?
Yeah, you kind of find out keeping going. Like you have the team of Layla Miller, Emma Frost, and Cloak. And why everyone's causing this giant distraction. This is the team that's looking for Charles Xavier. They find his memorial site, but then Cloak just goes into business for himself, goes underground and sees there's no grave there. And then meanwhile, you have this disappearing corpse of what they think is Wanda Maximoff, which the world is convinced is human for some reason. I don't think they really get into a lot of that too much, but it's just an interesting little wrinkle indicating if she doesn't have her powers, who's going to undo all of this? But then Doctor Strange is your other wild card here. They managed to get Doctor Strange back on the team, and he immediately knows where to go to find Wanda. He goes to this nice little, looks like a hotel suite on the top floor. And Wanda is hanging out there with a couple kids, putting together what looks like puzzles or blocks, indicating, they're just, that's what all this is just her putting together a puzzle, more or less, and trying to do all of that. And Doctor Strange slowly unravels the truth of all this. But the other shocking panel is Hawkeye also shows up and follows Doctor Strange. And once again, that aggressiveness with Clint here that I've not really seen too often, except for maybe the Ultimate stuff I've read. He just straight up puts an arrow in her back. He doesn't even mess around, doesn't even know he's there. He just shoots her immediately. So, Andy, how did you process all of this?
Well, just a few pages before that, you see the nonchalantness of Wanda saying, should I make another husk or another body? Did that have a big impact? I'll just make another one. So my first inclination here is what's dropping next? Because if she's capable of doing that before, was this really her? And she's going to get taken down this easily? There's a twist here somewhere that we're looking for, and I'm actually rereading it again now because I got sucked in.
Do you think that the Hawkeye characterization comes from Hawkeye, his wish not being to be alive, but being a leader, being the kind of alpha amongst the Avengers that he really never has been?
Hot damn.
He kind of took the in Disassembled, he did sacrifice himself to save as many Avengers as he could, but at the same time, even dating back to West Coast Avengers, it was always, there was this power struggle between Tony and Clint back then, and Clint never really got the chance to be the leader, the decision maker that he always knew that he could be. I think this is him stepping up and it being Alpha Hawkeye.
That's a very good
point. Yeah. I'm still hung up on that. I'm sorry. Did I cut you off?
No, you're good. I was done.
Okay. I'm still hung up on how they decided to characterize Clint in this run, just because, like Carson was saying earlier, there's so many different angles that you could look at this character from, and this just doesn't feel natural. It doesn't feel right for him. And there's a lot of aggressiveness. There's a lot of even anger, if you will, coming and radiating off of him. I just kind of let myself stick on that. Drew was also talking about Magneto kind of taking over everything. And I've always thought Magneto was the coolest guy ever. I really do think that he's done no wrong. I really do think that.
Except for all
seeing
those
him
people he
kind
murdered in the name of his mutant terrorism.
he's done
I mean,
Hey.
let's just forget all those. Let's
He's
forget
done
all
no
those
wrong.
Normal Homo sapiens, lesser flat scan sons of bitches. They can all fucking die.
He's done no wrong. He is, I do like that he's modeled after Malcolm X. And I think that kind of shows as he kind of takes over. I think that's, where everyone is kind of pointing fingers at Wanda, even with the book being House of Magnus, House of M. I think it's interesting that is the title, where Wanda is their greatest threat at the moment after, all of these things happening. And they're kind of turning that blind eye to Xavier and Magneto.
I just picture you having that Magneto was right shirt in your closet that Quentin Quire had in New X-Men.
I do know.
Yeah, wasn't that Quentin Quire t-shirt?
Yes, absolutely it was.
Yeah, Quentin Quire is one of my favorite characters because of his psychic t-shirts that he just changes. Like, it's just a white t-shirt. He just makes you see what he wants you to see on his t-shirt. Fantastic. Nice. Magneto was right.
I will die on that hill.
He certainly wasn't going about it the right way. I mean, just because mutants deserve a spot in the world doesn't mean that you can just murder people. Like, you probably shouldn't do that, Magnus. Like, and he's been the victim far more than he's been the aggressor in his history. I'll give him that. But yeah, one of my favorite characters because he is a bad guy, but he is the hero of his own story, and that's the kind of character that you really want to read. So, a lot of depth in Magneto. I don't think he gets nearly enough depth in this story. He's kind of just set dressing in a lot of ways. Towards the beginning and towards the end, he definitely has a lot more to do. But I think that he's also kind of falling on his sword here for Wanda because he doesn't know what to do. Like, you see that in the first issue. It's just like, what would you have me do? How can we undo what she's done so far? How can we fix her? How can we make her not be a threat to the entire universe? And he's at his wit's end there. So the fact that his dream basically is to have Homo Superior in a place of control, but more than anything, have a sense of control over his own life in a way that he doesn't going into this story. That I think is a big part of Magneto's arc. But was he right? Sure, he's always been right.
But yeah, you kind of find out like he's almost just the patsy in this book as Doctor Strange keeps going. They find out that Pietro, good old Quicksilver, was the one who convinced Wanda of this whole plan. And, obviously she was very mentally vulnerable at that point. So Pietro was kind of just able to come in and, make this right in his weird, convoluted Quicksilver type of way. And they basically, were able to steal away Xavier and use Magneto. And, obviously they knew the other heroes were going to be convinced that, hey, if all this happened and mutants are number one, it's got to be Magneto, right? And then they kind of figure out it wasn't. And then once Magneto gets the Layla Miller treatment, he is not happy because of, what has been done in his name. Obviously, he's big proponent of being a mutant, obviously, but I think he's just a big fan of his name in general. So when his name is dragged through the mud, he does not like that, even from his own son. And you got to get that's where maybe the character stuff in here is a little bit weird to me, but I guess that's just how cold Magneto is. That's the way Bendis writes him in this, because earlier you do have that scene where he's like, I would basically sacrifice my kids for the good of mutants, basically. If that's what it took to make the world better for mutants, I would sacrifice my children. And I mean,
that's part of their trauma as well, is that Magneto has never been a good father.
Right.
And, he when they manifested their mutant powers, of course he came back and picked them up and was like, I can use you, right? But I think that he just feels so helpless going into this whole situation. And when he realizes that he was taken advantage of, throwing Wanda under the bus is something that he doesn't want to do. throwing Lorna under the bus is something that he will never do. Throwing Pietro under the bus is something that he just is waiting for the right opportunity every time he throws him under the bus. He's just like, you're a little bastard. And he's like, yeah, that's because you didn't marry my mom. He's like, okay, but you're still a little bastard. Take your Quicksilver fucking white hair and your faster than the speed of sound bullshit and fuck off.
So obviously this creates a really big conflict between father and son, to the point where it interferes with what's going on with Scarlet Witch and Hawkeye and her existent or non-existent kids at this point. You never really find out in this story. Obviously, she has the kids later, but we're going to focus on this. And in this conflict, Wanda just goes ballistic because Hawkeye's there yelling at her. So he's gone. He just gets, taken apart like the blocks that her children are playing with.
Dusted.
Yeah, exactly. And then Pietro just gets wrecked by Magneto. And that's when Wanda kind of comes in and, she's just hysterical about the whole thing. And then she utters the famous words because of the rage she has against her father at this point. No more mutants. And then that's where you get the other White Flash. And then we go into issue 8 and we find out that the mutant population has shrunk drastically. Drew, how many?
98. 198 mutants left. And if you guys had those trading cards in the 90s, you know that there was like approximately 3 billion fucking mutants. So it's like every issue that had an X on it introduced 7 new mutants. Like I kind of wonder what like that first appearance speculation was like back in the 90s. Cause it's like, oh, this is X Force 3. It's got 17 new character appearances that you're never going to see these people ever again, except for when they finally get their trading card entry. But yeah, this was kind of a cool way for editorial to really streamline the mutants whose continuity had gotten out of control. And I think we're finally getting back to the point where every mutant that has ever lived is back in one shape or another in this Hickman X-Men that's going on now. But, I mean, that's 15 years of them slowly saying, okay, mutants aren't a big threat, and let's kind of build them back up and retool them. And a lot of characters lost their powers for a long time. We got some really interesting stories with the mutants. And then you get, Hope comes in and you get the whole Messiah complex situation. That all comes, we did that recently. Go in the playlist and check that out. That's why Andy went back and read this story. It's because after we read the Messiah complex, that is the first mutant that's born after this No More Mutants deal. So kind of a cool story device that they use to kind of upend all of the continuity.
Yeah, absolutely. And issue 8 kind of just like an epilogue to the story. You can find out which mutants lost their powers and that stuff. Like Iceman's probably like the biggest one who doesn't have powers by the end of this, even though you only see him on like one panel in the story. And Bendis seems to like to play with Iceman quite a bit for some reason. So that's like his experimental character when it comes to the X-Men.
He made him gay too.
Yeah.
Good for him.
I mean, sure. That's great. I mean, here's my deal with Iceman. I don't want to be all right.
Go ahead.
My problem with Iceman is that they made Iceman gay, which is like, that's fine. That doesn't bother me. It doesn't hurt me as far as that character is concerned. But then they gave Iceman his own story, and it's Cinna Grace writing Iceman in a way that shows you that Cinna Grace does not understand Iceman. Look, if Iceman likes wieners, bully for him, but like he should still be fighting bad guys and telling terrible jokes, because that's what Iceman does. And the fact that that jokey personality of Iceman has gone away in his own series, well, which has been canceled at this point, but that to me was like, I was reading all X-Men titles for a long time, and that's the one I dropped, was the Iceman story. And I enjoyed him in X-Men Blue when they were kind of experimenting that with that character a little bit more when he was younger. Pretty much Claremont wrote Bobby Drake to be gay. That's absolutely not true. That's absolutely not true. He wrote him to never settle down because he's a goofster who can't take life seriously. So under the Claremont run, Bobby had a lot of girlfriends. It's just that's just the way it is. I don't have a problem with the continuity changing. I just think that they the creators that they put on it did not do a very good job, and really clunky. I mean, a little off topic here, but really clunky the way that they had Jean Grey out Iceman in the end. So that whole deal, say what you want about it. I have no issue with retconning a character's sexuality. Doesn't bother me at all. Let's just not retcon who that character is when we do that.
All right. So yeah, like my only minor nitpick about the end of this story is literally like the last couple of pages, because I read this when it came out, like I said at the top of the show, and they talk about like all this power, and they're bringing up Edison and that stuff, how raw power can't be created or mass can't be created or destroyed. So where does it all go? And then it looks like you see in the right corner of the planet Earth at the end, maybe what would be the Phoenix Force. I don't know if I just looked at that differently. It looked kind of orangish to me, but I don't think we ever really get to see any follow-up to that whatsoever. Eventually, the mutants just come back. Like, for instance, Hope and, what we talked about with Messiah Complex. So I feel like that. I don't know if it's just they went a different direction creatively in all of Marvel, with Civil War the following year. I think it was maybe 2 years. I can't remember this second, but I feel like I kind of feel like there was like one plan and they skewed it in another direction. I don't know. It just felt like a little bit of a weird ending to me that was supposed to lead to something, and maybe I just didn't read the book. I mean, Drew, is there something that's led to that I missed?
The way I see is it leads back into the Phoenix Force showing back up looking for Hope later on when we get to Avengers versus X-Men. I think that at the same time in that story, you also get a lot of thought process from like Beast basically examining what happened with the No More Mutants. And Wanda can't just destroy all these mutants' powers. They have to, that power has to go somewhere. And the thought is that it kind of goes out into the cosmos. And when it comes back kind of exponentially. Like when the mutants start showing back up again, they start showing up everywhere. So that's kind of the deal with it there. And I think that it was supposed to be connected more with the Phoenix Force, but we got a whole lot of gobbledygook in between, and you don't see the Phoenix Force until Hope is. We've already been through Messiah Complex. Hope is already raising new mutants and training them, and we got a whole lot going on there before you get back to that Phoenix there. So I think that the idea basically was that these powers went into the Phoenix Force, and the Phoenix Force would bring them back. But I think that kind of was swept aside to do more stories.
All right, so I think that pretty much wraps up our review of House of M. So it's time for some final thoughts and impressions and scores. Andy, what do you score this one, bud?
Ooh, I'm left wanting closure. I grabbed the trade paperback off Comixology, and it was 200 and some odd 80 pages, and there was a whole second thing at the end called Secrets of the House of M. So this entire time I'm reading all this, I can't wait to get to the back end of this and find out more. Well, that's not actually a read. It's just tidbits here and there. So I never got the closure I was looking for on this. I had some nitpicks with the art. Like Annie, some of the pacing wasn't great. Drew picked out that as well. I still give this a solid 9.4 in my opinion.
What about you, Drew?
Yeah, this is 9.4 all day in my opinion. There's definitely some things that keep it from being perfect, but I think that it's greater than the sum of its parts. I think that its influence on the Marvel Universe is reaching a lot farther than this story does on its own.
Annie, what do you give this?
You know what? Even with those plot holes, the pacing issues, and some of the closure not being given, it's still a very influential book, as we see. And it's still generating a lot of traffic around it, and a lot of spin-offs and other stories to be told due to it. It's really changing the trajectory of this universe to this day, even with new books coming out. It's got to be a solid 9.
Nice. I think I'm going to agree with my two Modern Men co-hosts here. So I was going to go 9.4. So I think this first time in a while The three of us have actually had the same
There you
score.
go.
I feel like until the WandaVision buzz came along, this was almost kind of like the forgotten Marvel event for whatever reason, or maybe just slightly underappreciated. When people think 2000s, they'll go right to the Civil War comic event as like their favorite one. And I've always liked House of M just a little bit better, even though Civil War is great too in its own way. But I always just preferred House of M. I just thought it was a great read. Like I said, probably helped that I was reading both New Avengers and Astonishing X-Men at the time. So I was very happy with the result. I was just happy to see Bendis finally get his time with all these major characters on the 616 side compared to the Ultimate Marvel side of things, even though I definitely missed him on the Ultimate Marvel side of things once Ultimates 3 came out and they kind of ended the Ultimates good run. But yeah, I'm going 9.4. So yeah, we could spend a little bit of time talking about WandaVision and maybe some of the things you guys kind of wouldn't mind seeing that were taken from this book and maybe what you want to see in WandaVision in the next few weeks. So Andy, what are your thoughts on WandaVision and House of M compared to each other so far?
I have no thoughts. I have not watched WandaVision at all yet.
Spoiler alert!
Oh
It's
my
awesome, Andy.
Andy, it is such a good show.
I'll forget about everything in 24 hours. That's my bane. The bane of my existence is my terrible memory.
It says mutant ability.
Exactly, right? I've been looking forward to watching WandaVision, but it's trying to get time to sit down and binge it or at least watch a couple episodes. And I wasn't sure I should watch a couple before we did tonight's show or if I should just wait. So I decided to wait and then see what you guys had to say.
Yeah, I think you're getting half-hour episodes, and it's what, six episodes in the entire series?
5 or 6 right now?
Well, there's 5 out. I don't know, but I mean, look, it's something. It's something that you can sit down and like once it's done, you can sit down and binge it all pretty quickly. So
I'll watch it. I'll watch the 5 tonight then if they're only half hours.
Yeah, it's a half-hour bit, and the first it's like it's not the hour-long chunk, hour-and-a-half-long chunk that you see being put out there. I'll bite my tongue because I got a lot of spoilers on the mind, and I don't want to do that to you if you're going to watch it tonight.
I won't remember them. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that the way that they've kind of folded House of M as a concept into WandaVision is very tertiary. Like, it's not a direct correlation, but there is a pocket dimension type of area that is being vastly affected by Wanda and maybe more entities in a way that rewrites their reality. And that's where you're going to get the House of M type of influence from the WandaVision story. There's a lot more influences, I would say, from the Vision and Scarlet Witch comics than there are from House of M. But every time somebody's like, well, what the heck's going on here? Somebody in the internet comics says, House of M, House of M, House of M, House of M. We will see what it all ends up being in the end. But the fact that this is a lot of people acting strangely because of Wanda's influence is definitely a tie to House of M. And you can definitely see a lot of influence in the style of the way they are doing things as well.
This is definitely Olsen's best performance as Scarlet Witch, in my opinion here. Just because I think that there's a lot of character being brought to life here compared to a very stoic, very angry Wanda without, just coming out straight out of the stall, very pissed off. And I think that with what we see her doing and how she kind of manipulates herself and her world around her, it adds a lot of really nice context as to why this ties into House of M. It ties into Tom King's 2015 The Visions. I think even more than it does the House of M. From what we've seen so far, I think we've seen more The Vision than we have House of M besides that first chunk. I'll let you explore that on your own, but it's very cool how you get to see the nuances of this book. They're tied neatly around it, while old faces and new faces kind of make their appearances, and everything kind of comes out of the woodwork and really comes together to keep you on the edge of the seat. Even overall, it's a really clean nod to the eras of television and the eras of sitcoms, which I really personally enjoy, I was really skeptical to see how, I really was adamant about avoiding all promotional material, all trailers, all of that good stuff, because I wanted to go in not knowing anything. And it's really fun until like there's like a bleak moment in the show, and then it just picks up and it's a lot of fun again. And I think that having these different influences of different eras and working that into reality, or whatever this reality might be, it's just so clever. I don't know about you guys, but I really, really dug the first 2 episodes just because of how well that, Bettany and Olsen put themselves in this I Love Lucy, I Dream of Jeannie, Bewitched kind of era, and how natural it looked for them.
Yeah, William Byrd shouts out Vision Quest, as well as the Vision and Scarlet Witch limited series that I spoke of. Vision Quest story from West Coast Avengers ties into WandaVision a lot. I think House of M is a stylistic choice that they're utilizing, and kind of a lens that they want you to see the show through. That is really well placed from a production standpoint for them. I know that Feige is a huge fan of House of M, as well as the Vision and Scarlet Witch minis. So they've been talking about House of M a lot leading up to this, and I definitely think that it adds a lot of flavor to the show. Is it going to end up being, is she going to say, bring more mutants at the end? No, I don't think that's going to happen at all. I
really want to see
we're going to get that moment.
More mutants.
Nah, I mean, come on, more mutants, right?
Man, your Wanda impression is spot on. How long have you been working on that for?
That just comes naturally.
He has a better accent, though.
Yes, very much Sokovian. I think that, yeah, it is definitely a seasoning that they use for the show, yeah. But I think plot wise you're not getting a lot of House of M. I think stylistically you are.
I think that's really neat because it's not verbatim, and I think you're not expecting panel for panel transfer over, whereas you kind of go, oh my god, that could be traced back to XYZ, and then some internet theorist or whatever will come and tell you why you're wrong. I don't know. Or, someone will tell you, or break it down for you and kind of hold up those parallels without it being so overly explicit. And I think a really, really just interesting part of the show is that it can go in any direction that it wants to.
Right.
You can speculate. I could say, Thanos might show up next week, and everyone will be like, yeah, Josh Brolin spotted on set, and I can start a new rumor. And everyone would go, yeah, right. But the thing, it could catch on because that's the direction that this show is taking, because it is truly, every episode that you take, it jerks itself in a new direction, and it's very unpredictable. And that's what really charms that whole, as Drew said, flavors it up and spices it up.
Right. I agree. But I also think that at the same time, there's a limit on what we are going to get from this series. And I think 5 episodes in, we've gotten a lot more than I thought we were going to get. But 1 episode in and the internet's saying, oh, Wonder Man's going to be in here, and then we're going to get Grim Reaper, and then Ultron's coming back, and then there's going to be Mephisto, and then Agatha Harkness. It's like, slow your roll, because we're going to get some of that.
I do
think there's going to be a lot of sprinkles in here, but the main flavor of the ice cream tends to be that Vision and Scarlet Witch miniseries mixed with Vision Quest. And then you get a lot of Tom King Vision seasoning in here, and House of M seasoning that really spices it up a little bit. But I would not expect that we're going to get, the Fantastic Four is not going to spin out of this. We're not going to get a Dragon Man appearance. There's not going to be, there's so many things that I've read online, oh, you're going to see this character and you're going to see that character. Okay, let's just pump the brakes, slow your roll. There's a lot more MCU coming at you. I think that this is just a lot of what they're going to give us in here is just going to be little Easter eggs for the most part. Carson, what do you think? Have you watched all 5 episodes?
Yeah, I've watched all 5 episodes. I mean, it's just, I really enjoy it because they've kind of proven the possibilities are endless based on, the twist. I really don't want to spoil for Andy, so I won't. There's a twist at the end of the 5th episode that really opens up the possibilities and the floodgates for, what they can do with the MCU, in my opinion. Whether it be for the better or for the worse, we'll see. But I think there's only 4 more episodes to really, rein in the storyline they're doing with Wanda. So I'm really curious. Well, it's awesome they're expanding things, but I'm really curious to see where they're going to go with just Wanda and Vision at this point. Will Vision be alive past this? Will he just be that, a dead corpse again? We'll see. And then he also introduced, Monica Rambeau, that's not a little kid anymore from the Captain Marvel movie. I'm curious to see if they kind of continue with any of the Sword stuff. Especially since Nick Fury was with Sword at the end of Captain Marvel, basically. So, really curious to see where they go.
Confirmed to be in Captain Marvel 2.
Oh yeah, that's right, he was. From what we've seen of Vision and his different states, for lack of a better term for Andy, throughout the show over the last 5 episodes, and how we have seen his character kind of grasped hold of his new reality and his new home. What do you think of? How do you think that's going to go? How do you think that might take a turn?
I think that my opinion on that is too spoilery.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'll say it anyway. He's still dead. He's dead, and
okay.
if he leaves the bubble, the hex, he's going to still be dead. He's only alive inside. That would be my theory.
I think we'll have to have a different episode here in about 4 weeks when all this is wrapped up, just to kind of get a whole concept on, what all's happened on WandaVision. So it's about to the halfway point of that show now. So I definitely want to revisit this conversation once it's all wrapped up. But speaking of programming, let's get into a couple programming notes here on what's going on in Modern Men in the coming weeks. Next week, it's the big episode we've been hyping up for a minute. Episode 69, Sex Criminals by Matt Fraction and Chip Zdarsky. We'll be talking about that the day after Valentine's Day, next Monday. I've never read it. I've heard it's pretty insane. I can't wait to finally crack open that hardcover I have sitting over there. And then week 70, Andy, are we reading your Punisher book?
Yeah, we'll read the final days, actually. That arc, Punisher Volume 2, my favorite arc that I remember. I want to see if it holds up, right? Like, those arcs that are extremely special to individuals that they grew up with, that they just kind of like, they go back to try to read, and they're like, no, not yet. I want to hold on to the memories that I have. Well, let's crush my memories and see if it holds up.
Nice. But I have one more surprise planned before we say our last goodbyes and shout-outs and stuff. And that's, I finally remembered what the wild card gimmick was supposed to be. So we're going to go full wild card gimmick here. So I'm going to hit the share screen.
Wait. Before we go to the wild card gimmick, I want everybody to know, check us out Friday night, because Chad said there's going to be all kinds of gimmicks on the Friday night live show this week. 10:05 Eastern Standard Time, TBS Superstation times. For the Friday night A show.
Wow.
We're going to have special guests and
gimmicks.
gimmicks.
Special guests will be donating to charity. Super Chat will send your money off to someone who needs it more than you do.
And we'll do karate in the garage as well.
Oh, yeah.
We'll be best friends.
So here's, hopefully you guys can see the big wheel of names. It's all 3 of us here.
Nah, it's not up yet.
Oh, okay.
You're going to add it to stream.
Yeah, it says I added to the stream. So we'll do this instead. There we go. Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. All right. So basically, we have the wild card wheel here. And the other rule that I did establish last time is the Great Legend Show. He's made so many appearances on Modern Men. I told him he can have a wild card. Anytime he can make the show, we'll read something of his choice. So we got a Legends wild card also in play at any point. But this wheel is for what genre are you guys going to get? So the genres are 90s, 2000s, and 2010s.
Ooh.
So basically the first person who lands is going to have to pick the read from the 90s, the second one from the 2000s, and the third one will be from the 2010s. So any questions before I spin the wheel?
I dig this. I really dig this.
Okay.
That's not a question. Sorry.
Let's get Andy this 90s read.
All right, here we go. Who's going to pick a read from the 90s anytime they want?
It'll be Drew.
Probably. Let's see. It's going to be Andy. All right, Andy, I hope you're brushed up on the 90s, bud, because you just won.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so whoever lands next gets the 2000s wild card, and whoever is last gets the 2010s wild card. So let's see who gets what here. Oh, it's going to be close. Oh, thank goodness. I get the 2000s. Awesome.
All right.
I think that's perfect.
2010s. That is perfect.
I think so.
I like that.
All
Come
right,
up
so
with
there's
something
your
good for you
wild
guys to
card
read.
assignments.
All right, Headlopper, Volume 2.
Oh, good God, I'm sick. My horse, something. All right, so let's go and get some final thoughts here. Andy, where can people find you?
Oh, God. Wow. You guys can find me here every Monday on the next greatest comic book show on the Comic Core, where we read Modern Men reads all the time. And some of my favorite reads are some of the stuff that I never thought I'd ever read. I'm actually reading here, and I'm really loving this stuff. You guys can find me on my own channel, where I tinker around with some editing and some other live content. I just did a giveaway there not too long ago, and I've got about 2 or 3 video ideas that I'm trying to record and edit. You guys can find me on all the social media aspects. Just hit that @ symbol and do ComicManAndy, and you'll find me.
What about you, Drew? Where can people find DruManchu?
Oh, man. People can find me here on the Comic Core Monday nights and Friday nights, and occasionally throughout the week showing up other places. But more than that, on Saturday, the 20th of February, not this weekend, the following weekend, me and Carson will be getting together with the great legend to liquidate some of our comic book collections and put them in your hands, guys. This isn't your average auction on YouTube. This is not your average claim sale. We will not be trying to make massive profits. We will be trying to give you guys deals on these books. Deals and steals, spinning some wheels. We're going to be having a good time, and we're going to be selling some stuff. I know myself, I have like 12 long boxes I'm just getting ready to liquidate and get rid of. And there's going to be a lot of good stuff in there, so keep your eyes peeled for that.
Awesome. All I know is big, huge thanks to Andy Banks for joining us here on Modern Men. You are definitely welcome back anytime you'd like. But Annie,
Love to.
where can people find Annie Banks?
You guys can find me on the Comic Core Fridays and Sundays. I'll be kicking it with the Friday group, and then on Sundays, Cat Run Figures and I talk about movies. They're usually pretty bad. We are called Is It That Bad? If you're looking for some literature to read, I am writing all of our news pieces on mainframecomiccon.com, otherwise known as Mainframe Daily, and then Drew and I help out with those events from time to time. You can find us both there.
Ever so occasionally.
Nice. Well, you can find me. Just search cwoodard19 on Twitter, Instagram, Twitch. I just added Twitch.
Ooh,
and
there you go.
I synced up that big time PS5 to Twitch, and I actually tested out playing Uncharted 4 on YouTube. So I think I'm going to do a little bit more gaming on my channels now, just to get that ball rolling, and because that's what I've been doing more of, honestly, lately. So I still want to be able to share that fun and excitement with all of you guys out there. So subscribe to that Twitch, and we'll see what happens. And, of course, the YouTube, youtube.com/cwoodard19. And I will probably be live tomorrow with my Tuesday night live stream, which I haven't had in a while. I've got some turtle books to show because, of course, the turtles. We got to show the turtles. Talk some more about some action figures. If you notice behind me, I got action figures everywhere now because I had a day where I just decided to get all my old action figures out and display them and have fun with them.
Look,
So
first you got to go to Google,
that.
then you type in C, then you type in Woodard.
It'll
And that's
autocorrect the Great Legend because you're supposed to search for Great Legend on the Google machine. But anyway, big thanks for everybody who joined us in the chat, and we will see you guys next time.